Hi everyone, and welcome to flm204 here to fix PhD, or in my case, Flint 2009 for 2004. What we're going to do today is continue on talking about assembly from files and other systems. We're going to take a look at soft importing using the project that we examined last week and talk about some of the pitfalls and things to be aware of when you're working on it, and then dive into some other stuff using Final Cut Pro XML. The idea behind this is to kind of show you some pitfalls and things that I ran into while debugging some of this on projects here. And we do a wide variety of projects from DPX files to QuickTime movies, even in the occasional FX Guide TV sweetening. So again, have some experience doing this, and at times just banging my head against the wall because I think the implementation could be a lot better in these products. But they actually have hired a new workflow guy recently. And I think it was the middle of last year, and he's been doing some bang-up work. But it's gonna take a little bit of time for those to work their way into products. So again, it's getting better and better. We're using SP3 on extension 1. Again, these change from extension release to service pack release. So be really aware of that. All right, so what we're going to do, let's go ahead and start in with importing. Not importing any EDL, but importing some images. Let's go ahead and do a new reel and do import. And so let's go ahead and import image. Let's go ahead and go here to Smoke Vault, where I have basically a RAID 0 drive just for temporarily storing stuff. And here are my directories with the PTA stuff. If we go in, what we can do is hit scan subdirectories, and we'll get all these directories in. We're going to ignore the first part of this. You can see I've got some proxy directories, and we'll talk about this in a second. What we're going to do is go ahead and select these files. One thing to be aware of when you're working, and this was a gotcha that can easily come back and bite you, is this down here. The width and height ratio and format are all active when you're importing. So I've got this selected. It says 2.0, but if you happen to have this set to 16 by 9, when I load this image in, it's actually not going to load it in with a pixel aspect ratio or an aspect ratio of the file of 2. We're actually going to get a ratio of 1.778 on the desktop. And that can cause quite a bit of consternation if you're working, especially working with QuickTime files and so forth, where the XML is a little bit, should I say, less friendly in letting you know whether you've got the file. So if we hold this, you can see that I've got 10-bit 1.78 down here. That's not what we want. So again, something to be aware of. Very, very important. Another thing to be aware of when you're working is that you want to make sure that you have all this stuff set correctly as well. It can be really frustrating when you're working to actually have this set up and not have entered time code or not have the tape name that you want it, whether you want to enter it manually or whether you want to get from the file header. Here we're going to get file header time code as well. That's obviously critically important when we're assembling from an EDL. So again, just once again, be aware of this. This is true whether you're importing or soft importing, which is why I mentioned this. I'll generally leave this, swap it over to file aspect as soon as I can. Now what we want to do is you want to go ahead and click this and say soft import full res, which will allow us to, we'll load these in. I'm going to go ahead and load these on and let it load up while we're talking. It's going to basically create proxies. It's going to create proxies with the settings that we've set up in our file. So we've actually got 50% proxies going on. So it's going to create proxies, and I've got a pretty high quality proxy mode set up. So it's just generating these, but it's not going to import the full res. So what ends up happening is our Stone file system that I've got going, I'm basically got proxies stored locally, but it's going to access the actually full resolution files right off this second drive system that I have that's called Smoke Vault. Now, what's really interesting, we don't have this set up here because I just haven't been able to get on the machine and had time to actually archive everything off and rebuild our system. Instead of using a Stone file system, you want to go, I would really suggest that you go with a standard file system. And basically what you're doing with that is actually setting up your disk array that would normally be your Stone file system, the stuff that you've got hooked up on fiber to your system. And by setting it to standard FS, what you can use is you can actually use that entire drive as an NFS mount. So you actually end up sharing it between your clip library and then, say, transferring these files over to that. So you end up getting really, really fast access on the drive if you want to do things that way. It can actually save some time. So let's say in the background, I could just have someone, transferring over a bunch of QuickTimes and soft import them, and we'll take a look at doing that without actually loading them into the Stone file system. Now what happens is you get a normal clip directory like you would if you had StoneFS. You have a directory where all your clips are, and it acts just like a normal StoneFS that you're used to over the years with Discrete and Autodesk. But the benefit of having a standard FS is that you can actually export that as an NFS drive or Samba drive and have people drop stuff directly on it. So that's pretty cool. Of course, you have to worry about a little bit about file space and so forth, but it makes a lot of sense. Hopefully, before the end of the term, I can actually walk us through how that gets done. It's actually not looking good at this point because we're in the middle of a month-long job. But again, the instructions are really clear in the file system and networking guides. It tells you how to do that. Basically, you just need to archive off everything on your file system and then have your engineer, or if you're like me, you are the engineer, actually build that system. So these are still importing here. It takes a little bit of time, again, processing the proxies. So I'm going to go ahead and stop recording, and then we'll come back to the recording once everything has been imported in. All right, so we've got these loaded in, and again, they've got these DPX icons here. If we load it out into the desktop, load them all into the desktop. You can see they can play back the proxies, of course, without a problem in real time. I will say probably that at 2K, these aren't going to play back right off the file system. Not too bad, actually. There we go. We got some hitches there. All right, but again, I'm just kind of showing you what you can do if you had a very fast file system to have access to. And then what you can do is you can just simply go ahead and let's go ahead and just make this easy. Let's do that new reel. I don't know. For DPX. Select all these, drop them down here, go into EDL, load this in, select our import DPX, and we've got these all set up and ready to go. Again, in the EDL, you can go ahead and assemble these off. We can resize it if we wanted to, or we could just assemble it. And here we've got our finished spot. Okay, so that could be really useful if you were connected on a really fast network. You had a shared storage. You don't have to load those in, and so it can work really well for you. Now, what do you do? Well, actually, you know what? Before we cover that, let's talk about that idea of what I wanted to show you, which was importing proxies that are already made. So let's go ahead and try a new reel. And let's go ahead and import image and scan subdirectories. Now, what we've got here, if we go out in our shell, we go into PTA red. We've got all these files with directories in them. I've got to turn off my Apple saving DS files. If we go into here, do an ls, you can see that we've got all the files and then a folder called proxy, where we have files within that. And what's happened is we've actually had the files that are generated, these proxy files that are generated by the person who's doing the baseline transfer. So they're half-res files. If we take a look at it, they're 1024 by 512 at 10 bits. And that corresponds, we have a proxy folder in each of these folders that corresponds to the full res. So here's the full res version, 2048 by 1024. So what we want to do is we have this button down here called proxy import. And what that allows you to do is, just like anything, you can link these proxies in this folder with the original files. So instead of generating the proxies, when you import these files, you're actually importing these proxies. And if you have a ton of scenes, this can save an incredible amount of time. And honestly, it's very standard to have in film scans, have proxy scans at high quality, or proxy resizes done at high quality that you can import. But what we need to do is tell the software where to find those files. All right, so this is a good example. We've got this file here, and what we want to do is we want to say the proxy root path is at the same as the full res. I mean, it could be on a different drive if you wanted to. And we're going to say it's relative to the full res files down one level. And what you can do is, if you scroll down here, you can actually have it search down 3 levels, up one level and down one level, up 2 and 3. And it's actually going to search all those, okay, for a proxy with the same matching name. You could also, if you wanted to, just have a file name match, which is in the same directory, and you could have it say add proxy to it, and you just use a wildcard with that as well. But what we're going to do is we're going to say it's one level down one level. It can be a little dicey there. Same as full res file name. And then we'll set our full res path at current. And so you can see here's our current. The proxy root path is here. And then if we take and hit now proxy scan to active, you can see what happens is we've got the full res versions here. Those other ones disappear and it says, hey, look, I found the external proxies. And so now all you need to do is select these and load. And so instead of actually building the proxy imagery, it's actually going to say just importing the proxy files. Okay, so instead it builds the clip. So in other words, it goes through, gets the metadata for each full res clip, and then it imports the proxy files. And you can see this is actually taking a lot less time than it would if you just were actually set up to render. You can always you could background your proxy generation. But again, in this case, this is really a good way to doing this, and it's actually quite common to have this done. So again, some nice changes in the recent versions of software. I think that was a change in 2009. Maybe they're a little bit earlier, but again, quite useful. So again, we'll go ahead and just exit out of this and cancel doing that because we've already got those. And then just go back in and take a second to actually talk about, I think if I hold confirm down. So just go ahead and cancel out of that, and so let's go ahead and cancel out of this and go ahead and go back into our library and take a look at some issues that come up when you're archiving soft imported footage. All right, go ahead and drag these out. And again, what we've got here now is we've got all our clips. Let's say our job's done. Obviously, you'd have a lot more if your job was done here, right? But again, we've got our master here. We've got all our clips. And let's talk about going to archive. So if we go in an archive, we'll do is go ahead and do a file-based archive, because that's frankly what I've been doing most of the time now too. And we'll call this flm204 class08. And we'll format this, and let's just make it a large file, and do this and format it. And what we want to do when we're doing this is go ahead and say save from library, and we'll go ahead and do our clip library. And what we want to do is we have two options when you're archiving. We can archive linked or stone. What stone means is when you archive this, it's actually going to take these soft edited clips, having a tough time saying that, and constonifies them. In other words, changing them from being soft imported to having your data on the stone file system or the standard file system, depending upon you have it set up. But again, it's going to be put on the stones. Or you can do linked. And what linked will do is actually not save these clips, but it will actually end up just saving the metadata. In other words, the link to these clips on your file system. So that's what we're going to do now. So go ahead and just hit save and close. And you can see how quickly it archived everything. We're already writing writing all the slates. We've already got this archive because it's actually not needing to archive any of that data from the library. Okay, so that's really cool, actually. The thing to remember with this, though, however, is that you need to make sure that these files are in the same location when you restore the archive. Otherwise, it's not going to find them. All right, so let's go ahead and just show you what this means. Let's go ahead and go up here. And let's just move the PTA red directory to PTA hide. So what I'm thinking is when we load back in this archive, it's actually not going to find the files, right? So let's go ahead and just verify that. Let's go ahead and open and load. And we'll go ahead and load these into the onto the desktop. Again, it should actually happen quite quickly for us. It's actually building all the metadata and so forth for us. And you can see now that we've got pending render, and that's because we have a pending render on the proxies, okay, because the proxies aren't saved. If I take this and look at it in proxy res, you can see we've got pending render. If I switch to full res, you get this nice checkerboard, and what that's saying is that, lo and behold, it cannot find the actual original files. If we take a look at this, you can see that's where our original files are. So what you can do is actually we could go ahead and move it back to the same location, but that's not always going to be an attractive proposition. Maybe you can't, maybe you don't have room on the drive and where they were before. So you can actually do what's called a symbolic link, which is actually just creating an alias or pointer to the file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do ln-s, and I'm going to say, okay, take pta hide, that's my real folder, right? That's where the files actually are. And I'm going to say, actually, let me do this first real quick. I'll show you the directory. So we have a directory that says pta hide. So do ln-s, and we'll say pta hide, and then we'll call it, say, what was our original name of that? I've forgotten that now. Go ahead and go back here. pta red to pta red. Go ls minus al. You can see now that PTA red is just pointing to PTA hide. Now what should happen now, if I take this clip and hit play, it can actually see those files now. All right. So now it's actually correctly finding the files, solve the problem of it not knowing what was there. Okay. So it's really important when you're making that decision to archive linked or stone. Stone, you'll be safe. You'll get your media back. Linked, that could be fine because you're doing archiving your facility and you don't want to load it in, but you just need to know that if you need to find out where to put the files, if you're confused by that when it happens, you need to come out on the desktop and take a look at that because that's not readily accessible in the library. Again, it's just a good idea to have standard procedures that you set up so that when you're doing this, you know that's always going to be come back to the same thing, same place, and reload reliably for you. Okay, that's really the critical issue here. So again, that's a look at soft import. A couple of the pitfalls to look out for, a couple gotchas that I've run into in the past in hopes of kind of saving you from those same things. So let's go ahead now and talk a little bit about Final Cut Pro XML to close out the class, and we'll dive into a more complex example next week. Let's go ahead and switch over to the Macintosh and dive in. All right, so we're over here on the Mac, and we've got this Angie tattoo edit that we've used before in the past. It's got several different layers, and what's nice about Final Cut Pro XML is that, go ahead and delete this track, we don't need it. You can actually bring these things in with resizes and so forth, and we took a look at that earlier, and that's what, especially in this case, which is really nice to have. So what we're going to do is not every time do you have the need for generating what we did last week, which is in essence a digital negative of what we shot. It's a perfectly valid workflow to just take a 10-bit uncompressed image from these proxies. You're not necessarily getting lower quality as long as you've got your import settings and everything correct. It's kind of beyond the scope of this class to set that, but there's nothing inherently wrong with doing a 10-bit finishing with this material, and frankly it can be a lot easier at times. So what we're going to do is, the idea behind this is we're going to take the sequence and we're going to media manage all these R3D QuickTime proxies that are generated from the R3D file, and media manage it, convert these into 10-bit uncompressed files, and create a new project. And you basically do that through the media manager. So what we're saying here is we want to recompress. You can recompress media using blank, and we'll set a custom. You can select how many handles, so you're not doing all the clips. And then basically what happens is it will duplicate the project and put them in a new project, and you'll have a new sequence. And from there, we'll export an XML, and that XML will reference those QuickTime movies. But there are a couple gotchas here that I want to talk about when you're working with Red. We want to do the 2K finish, 2048 by 1024. But those of you familiar with Red, if you look at this, let's go ahead and reveal these in a Finder. Let's open this up. And you can see that we're using this proxy that's actually 1024 by 512. All right, we don't want to use these to generate our files. We want to do the 2048 by 1024. Now you can resize your sequence if you want here. So let's go ahead and just duplicate that and take a look at what happens with that. Let's go ahead and duplicate. Open up, we'll save this test. If we go to our sequence settings, and what we can do is we'll do custom 2048 by 1024. Okay, then we end up having this, which is actually really not what you want. We have this thing, so she's just centered in there, this 2048 by 1024. So now what do we do with this not matching? Well, we could take this, and you have this thing where you can do either scale to sequence, and that seems to scale your clip up all right, correct? Well, the problem is what you're doing is you're actually scaling at 200%. So basically you're taking a 1024 by 512, they're calling medium proxy, and just blowing it up. So if we were to recompress this using uncompressed 10-bit, we'd be doing a blow up on it and then compressing it. What we need to do is we need to take this information and replace all these clips with a clip that is actually 2048 by 1024. So if we take a look at this, let's go ahead here, and if we reveal this in Finder, you've got your medium resolution proxies here, right? So if we take a look at this, you can see that this is 1024 by 512. We have our high res, which is actually the clip that we want to be using. That's 2048 by 1024. And what's really nice about this is if we look at this, the only difference is this _h and _m. And using the power of XML, which is just a text file, we can edit that. I mean, that's one of the great things about XML is you can just edit the shit out of it, go in and change stuff, take a look at it. It works out really well. So what we're going to do is we'll go ahead and take this, and you select the sequence, and what we're going to do is we're going to want to export an XML. Go ahead and OK. And we'll go ahead and call this temp. That's fine. And then we'll come out here, and I'm going to edit this XML file, and you can see it's an XML file. I love the way Final Cut always hides the extension. I never want to hide the extension. We'll go ahead and open with BBEdit, which is a text editor program. Just basically going to do a search and replace. And what I want to do is, if you take a look, you can see here in the file, just various structure, and it's really human readable. If you take a look at this, you've got something here that the name of the sequence, Angie Temp. So I'm going to go ahead and while I'm here, I'm just going to go ahead and change this to say converted so that we know it's a converted version of the sequence when we load it in. The starting time code, the duration, the resolution, and then you have all these clips here. You have an ID, which is effectively the clip name. This is an item. And then you have it referencing an actual movie. So what we want to do is I'm going to do a search for everywhere that says 328_m and replace it with 328_h. So it accesses the high resolution of that. So let's go ahead and do that. We got this set in. Basically, I'm going to start at top, replace all. 150 occurrence of 328m will replace by 328h. I'll go ahead and save this as converted. XML. Go ahead and close that. What I'm going to want to do is come in here and say import XML, and we'll load in this converted one. Choose it. Angie Tattoo. We want it to reconnect the media files, include all our effects. And again, you can see that's where I named it in the file. Remember, I renamed it for clarity. Otherwise, we would have had another one come in. If I double click on this now, we take a look at this. You can see, check this out. All the H's have been here. We reveal in Finder. We're actually accessing the high resolution versions. And so we pretty much got this all together. You can see now here we have this little scale on the front. The scale here, I guess right there it is, 103. So all this translated. So we've got a new sequence that's 2048 by 1024. And now we can media manage it. I want to point out there are a couple things that are probably going to be wrong, and that's here, still frames. If you do make a still frame, make a freeze frame, it's going to reference the old data and old footage because it really hasn't changed. So what we need to do is actually, if you take a look at that time code, we can actually remake that freeze frame. But again, this is a lot easier than rebuilding the sequence from scratch, right? Again, what we're trying to do here is just make it easier on us. All right. So let's go ahead now. And I'm going to go ahead and use the Media Manager. And the Media Manager allows your, what I need to do is I need to select this. And it's actually a good procedure just for that reason. It does whatever window you have selected. We'll go Media Manager. And I'm going to recompress the media. Let's not use the intermediate codec. And let's go here and just go down to our custom. 2048, 1024, custom aspect ratio, square, uncompressed 10-bit, and we'll hit OK. We don't want to include master clips outside the selection. We do want to delete unused media because, well, maybe you don't, but if you wanted to include everything that was in red, every clip that was used, the entire clip, you do this, but we're going to use handles, and we're going to say set the handles to 1 second. We're not going to set this. We're going to base our media files on existing file names, duplicate the selected sequence, and place it into a new project. So let's go ahead and select our destination. And so I'm going to go here, as I'll say flm204, Angie Tattoo. And we'll go ahead and click OK. It will ask us for name of the project. This is the project that we're now going to create. So I'll just go ahead and call it Angie Tattoo. And now what it's going to do, it's going to go out and start writing the files and recompressing them. So here's that folder we created. Here's the media, and then the project media. And now it's just recompressing these one by one, going through all the files and prepping them. So now they're in a 10-bit QuickTime uncompressed format that we can read in Flame, and it'll make it really easy for us to just load that in. So let's go ahead and let it compress. And again, if we take this, we'll open this up. And if you get info, you can see now we have an Apple Final Cut Pro uncompressed at 2048 by 1024. So I'll go ahead and let this do this, and then I'll start recording again once it's done. Okay, so that's done, and what you can see has happened is we have a new project open up that we named, and then we have this new sequence, Angie Tattoo version 2, and with our new footage in it. All right, so if you take a look back out, you can see here that all the new media is here and so forth, and you can see that's create a folder with all the new footage that we have basically compressed to 10-bit uncompressed. So we're ready to go. We just need to do one more thing, and that's we want to export an XML now of our new sequence that links it to the newly generated footage for Flame to use. So we'll go ahead and do that, and we'll add G project, and we'll call it XML, and replace that, and we're good to go. So let's go ahead and head back over to Flame and check out how to get that footage in. Okay, back in Flint, and what we'll do is go ahead and go into the library and import XML. Go here, and what we'll do is select this, and what we want to do is we want to link with audio and video files. Okay, we don't want to capture from tape. These are file-based. So we'll go ahead and load this in. And when we load this in, you can see here that we've got all of our movies listed here. The start, the duration, the path, and so forth of where we could find it. But the problem is it doesn't seem to be finding anything. So what we need to do is we actually need to say, to give it the path name of where to find it. So let's go ahead and we'll select all these, and you can select them all by setting this here. Go ahead and select the path. Go to Smoke Vault, Angie Tattoo, Media, and we'll set this to the directory. And now you can see you've got a little gray check mark here. This signifies that, hey, it found it. We don't have to worry about importing a LUT. And what you can do then is we can just go ahead and import those. Now what we can do is we can hard import those. So at this point what I would do is just go ahead and say import selected files. Or we can do like we did with the DPX files and actually do soft import. We'd read these 10-bit DPX or 10-bit QuickTimes right off the file system. In this case, the speed is probably, again, not going to be good enough. You can actually do this, and we'll see it next week with DVC Pro HD stuff. But for now, let's go ahead, and we'll just go ahead and say hard import all these, and we'll go ahead and import the selected files. So this will take a bit to load in, and we'll let it run and start recording again once it's done. All right, so we've got everything back in now. You can see that the hard import, you can see it's relinkable. So now what I do is say hit relink, and you can see that it relinked 23 video sources and 11 audio sources and 1 clips with no missing media, which is a good thing because it means that we paid attention to all our settings and so forth when we loaded stuff in. So if we exit recapture here, you can see that this is our original Angie Tattoo that we've got loaded in, and then this is our recapture, and then here's the assemble that we have. So let's go ahead and take this, and let's go ahead and go into batch with that. and T-click. Go to our timeline, and there you can see our timeline. And we'll go ahead and zoom out here. Control pre, and let's use our proxies actually. And if we take a look at this, let's go ahead and scroll down here. You can actually see that if we select this, we have an axis effect. And you can see that it's got that 103% scale on it. So again, as we go through, you get the 124% scale. So a lot of those things transferred in with what we needed. And again, this is a good start for us. Some of the crop is not there, but that's actually, that may just be because of my focus. Yeah, a lot of the crop comes through as well. Again, it's all assembled from red footage. Again, very good quality. We're at 10-bit uncompressed. Obviously, not necessarily the kind of tweaks that you get from the DPX, but again, pretty damn good and pretty easy to do versus some of the workflow that involves working in Final Cut with DPX sequences, which is going to DPX files through Crimson Workflow or through Monkey Extract, at which point you lose the XML information. So again, consider this, not a down and dirty, but certainly something that a good way to proceed if you want to maintain some high quality, but then get in the smoke and do some finishing tools that maybe your clients have come to expect. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this look this week at our first look at Final Cut Pro XML. Our next class will be doing more and taking a look at stuff dealing with things like multiple codecs. How do you deal with that? As well as hopefully taking a look at some other tools for getting stuff really easily into Smoke and Flame. That's it for this week. Until next week, as always, thanks for being part of FX PhD.